Now that we've talked about the pie charts on page 239 and looked at the two biggest slices of the pie, the individual income tax and the Social Security taxes, plural, remember, Social Security and Medicare. Okay. What about the other slices of the pie? The third biggest slice of the pie, the purple one, is for borrowing. Okay. The United States government borrows money every year. As we're going to learn in chapter 10 when we talk about government spending, the United States government spends more money than what they bring in from taxes. So the government brings in $4 trillion, but they turn around and spend $5 trillion. How is it that the government spends money they don't have? They borrow it. And we'll talk a lot more in chapter 10 about how they borrow it and who they borrow it from and the consequences of the borrowing. Okay? But the United States government does borrow a lot of money every year. This year, the government is scheduled to borrow about $4 trillion. That's far and away the most they've ever borrowed. Okay? Of course, the big part of that was because of the pandemic, but we'll talk about that in chapter 10. Borrowing is not a tax, but it is a source of revenue or money for the federal government. What about some other taxes that the United States government collects? Well, you'll see the red slice of the pie for the corporate income tax. When you and I make money, and your parents, we pay the individual income tax. But what about a corporation like Walmart or Amazon or Ford Motor Company or Apple? Okay? Do these corporations make income? Certainly they make income every year. Okay? And they're required to pay the corporate income tax. If you look in the book, it says that the maximum corporate tax rate is 35%. That's a lot of money. Okay? Well, in 2017, President Trump and Congress passed new tax legislation that lowered the corporate tax rate from 35% down to a flat 21%. So all corporations now pay 21% in corporate tax. This was very controversial at the time. Okay? People said, hey, wait a minute. Why would you give corporations like Walmart and Amazon that are making millions and billions of dollars, why would we give them a tax break? This was a good question. Okay? We'll try to answer that when we get to chapter 15, when we talk about the government's taxing plans and how they're supposed to influence the economy. But this was a very controversial idea that they lowered the corporate tax rate. Okay? The next slice of the pie, after the corporate tax rate, okay, the red slice of the pie, these other ones are much smaller, but the next one is an excise tax. There are excise taxes on certain products. An excise tax is a tax on the sale or manufacture of certain items, like tobacco, or the one that we've talked about, the gas tax. When you buy a gallon of gas, you have to pay a separate tax, not just sales tax, but you pay a separate tax on that gasoline. The federal gas tax is 18.4 cents per gallon. So when you go and buy a gallon of gas, 18.4 cents per gallon is going to the federal government. And that doesn't seem like much, 18 cents a gallon, but think about 18 cents a gallon times every gallon of gas that you bought and everybody else is buying in the state of California and all across the United States every single day. This adds up to a lot of money. Okay? Interestingly, the federal gas tax has not gone up since 1993. That's 27 years. The tax has not gone up. A lot of people are saying that the gas tax should go up to help generate more money to help repave the roads. Okay? But again, nobody likes higher taxes, so the federal government has not. The state of California also adds gas taxes. And in California, we're number one. We have the highest tax rate per gallon of gas of any state in the entire country. On July 1st, it went up to 50.5 cents per gallon. And every July 1st, they passed a new law a couple years ago, every July 1st it's going to go up. It's now 50.5 cents per gallon in the state of California. That's a lot of money. That's 69 cents a gallon in gas taxes, not to mention the sales tax on top of that. So excise taxes are a tax on the sale or manufacture of certain items like gas or tobacco. If you looked at your water bill or your electricity bill, you'd see some more taxes on that. On your cell phone bill, you'd see some taxes on that. And a tax on the sale or manufacture of a specific item like gas is called an excise tax. All right, the next tax that we need to learn about is an estate tax. Estate tax. What is your estate? When you die, the value of all the things that you leave behind are considered your estate. So if I were to die today, the value of my home, the money in my bank accounts, the money that's in my retirement accounts, but also the possessions inside my home, like the television sets and my clothing and the furniture and so forth, they make up what's called my estate. Sometimes this is called an inheritance tax because I won't have to pay it when I die because, well, I'll be dead. But the people that are inheriting my estate might have to pay the estate tax. And I say might have to for this reason. Everybody is allowed to exempt or not pay tax on a certain amount. And when President Trump took over, they started to raise the exemption amount. And it's currently $11.6 million. In other words, if I die with an estate valued at $11.6 million or less, then my children will not have to pay any taxes on that. Okay? But if my estate is valued at more than $11.6 million, they'll have to pay a tax on the value above that. So let's make it simple. Let's say that I die with houses and cars and boats and stocks and cash that's worth $12.6 million. They get to inherit the first $11.6 million, no taxes. But they would pay a tax on the other $1 million that it goes above that. The estate tax is not a big deal for most Americans because most Americans don't have estates valued at more than $11.6 million. What principle of taxation do you think the estate tax is based upon? Is it based upon the benefit principle or the ability to pay principle? Well, certainly it's the ability to pay principle. Because who pays the estate tax? Rich people. And that's why most Americans are okay with it, because it's not a tax on them, it's a tax on somebody else that's really rich. Okay? All right. Rich people are usually smart, or at least they can hire somebody that's smart to help them out. And so they began to give away their stuff before they died. They said, well, what if I give you all that stuff before I die? Since I know I'm going to leave it to my children, what if I give it as a gift to my children before I die? And the IRS said, not so fast, my friend. We also have what's called the gift tax. So if you try to give it away, there's a tax on that as well. Now, you don't actually pay a tax on what you give away. It just comes off this amount, that exemption amount. So let's say I gave away $1 million worth of stuff before I died. Then when I die, then only 10.6, right? 1 million would be subtracted from that. All right. Again, it's not a huge amount of money because there's not that many crazy rich people that are leaving behind that kind of money. All right, there's two more things there on page 241. Okay. One of them is a customs duty. If you've ever traveled to another country, when you come back at the airport, you have to go through something called customs. You have to go through customs. And what they ask you, if you remember, those of you that have traveled, they're going to say, what are you bringing back? Okay? If you bring back stuff that's valued at more than a certain amount of money, they make you pay a tax on it. Okay? Maybe you've been to a foreign airport and they have duty-free shops. Duty-free. Okay? Meaning you're not going to have to pay a tax on those items. Okay? But if you go through, if you bring stuff back from a foreign country, the last time I checked, you could bring back up to $800 worth of stuff without having to pay a tax. But anything above $800, you are going to have to pay a tax on that. Why would the government tax us on stuff that we're bringing in from foreign countries? Is it about making a lot of money? No, because they don't make a lot of money from the customs duties. It's about protecting American businesses. For example, Italy is famous for men's suits. Okay, some of the best men's suits, the Armanis, the Canalis, the Giorgios, those suits are from Italy. But if I were to go over to Italy, they would be a lot cheaper. So if I went over there and I brought back, say, 5 or 6 suits to the United States, who would that hurt? Well, it would hurt the American suit manufacturers. So the government puts a customs duty on those imported suits to drive up the cost of those foreign suits so people will buy American suits. You buy a Brooks Brothers suit, you buy a Calvin Klein suit instead of buying an Armani suit, because the Armani suits are way more expensive, in part because of the customs duty. All right, and then the last one is a user fee. A user fee is simply a fee that the government charges for using a good or service. Okay? The example they use in the book is a good one. If you go to a national park like Yosemite or the Grand Canyon, you have to pay a fee to get in to those parks because you're the one that's using those parks. You're enjoying them. You pay a user fee. Okay? They don't get very much money from those. All right. So that covers all of the pie charts on page 239. Where does the federal government get money? It gets money from individual income tax, Social Security taxes, the corporate income tax. I skipped borrowing. They borrow money. They also get it from the estate tax. They get it from excise taxes on gasoline and so forth. They get it from customs duties and user fees. Now, what about the state and local governments? Where does the state of California get money? Where does the city of Covina get money? Well, that's the next video.